Getting rich. The American dream. To get all you want, when you want it. Today it may seem as impossible to get rich as moving the planets. News coverage stacks the odds against you with stories about college grads unable to get the job they want. These guys won't help make you rich, no matter how much you protest. Today there's a better opportunity to become wealthy more so than at any other time in history. And there's proof of that statement with around 10 million American millionaires. Becoming rich is not just a goal anymore, it is required. For anyone planning for retirement, it takes about 1.2 million to create an annual income to sustain your lifestyle. The good news is, there are lots of ways to create personal wealth. It's your right to be rich. Getting rich isn't just for the latest high-tech genius. A surprising fact is that 12% of America's millionaires are educators. Job security and lifetime saving plans work. Of course, corporate executives, business owners, and entrepreneurs are on the list, but there's opportunity for everyone. Education is key to wealth creation. This is the story of two men who did more to make education available than any other. Both men were born into poverty. Both were destined to rise to riches and change the world. Tough times have a way of bringing out the best. These two men, Andrew Carnegie, once the richest man in the world and one of America's iconic businessmen, and Napoleon Hill, the first major teacher of success principles, revealed the secrets that prove one thing: your right to be rich. You've been given an inheritance from the richest man on earth. Before he died, this legendary figure created an unusual will that gifted to you everything that you'll need to reach the highest levels of accomplishment possible. That will has been the basis for the life-changing works by Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill's works have touched millions worldwide. Today's philosophy of success teachers still use the research formulas taught by Napoleon Hill. It's 1850-something and a young man sits at his desk. The note he's writing to himself will change his life. It's also a message to millions of others that will reveal secrets of success for centuries to come. Before Andrew Carnegie became the world's richest man, he writes his purpose for his life on this page. It's a simple plan to spend the first half of his life amassing a fortune, and then to spend the second half of his life giving it all away. The most valuable thing he left behind wasn't just the money. His most valuable gift is a blueprint that anyone can use to follow in his footsteps. Andrew Carnegie rose from rags to riches. Had he not discovered and utilized the success principles that made him wealthy, perhaps there would have never been an industrial revolution. Who was Andrew Carnegie? Why would he leave to you the keys to his fortune? Books and documentaries have been written and produced about his life and the lives of his contemporaries, such as Henry Ford.
Well, I think everybody's decided that they've got to go to work. I think from now on, there's no one can stop this great country from going ahead.
John D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan. Newer, faster ways of producing steel. Discovering rich oil fields and refining it into fuel. Managing money through investments and savings. These men proved that America was not discovered, America was built. And America was built by average, ordinary men with extraordinary vision, skills, and abilities. Of all the giants of industry, Andrew Carnegie is the one who developed a plan that anyone can use to achieve their dreams. If Andrew Carnegie sat across from you today and asked, "Why do you want to be a millionaire?" the answer may seem obvious. Instead of all the things you could buy, he would most likely advise you to become wealthy not because of the things you can buy, rather because of what you become. Becoming rich is not your signature moment. What you become in the process of pursuing wealth is your signature moment. Andrew Carnegie became the richest man on the planet and ended up giving it all away. And his example has led contemporaries like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett to follow in his footsteps. These two are leading others to follow. They created the Giving Pledge to motivate America's wealthiest individuals and families to give away the majority of their fortunes to charity. Andrew Carnegie was born in Scotland in a typical weaver's cottage with only one main room in 1835. The town was the medieval capital of Scotland. The city was also a center of the linen industry, and Andrew's father was a weaver, a profession the young Carnegie was expected to follow in. However, the Industrial Revolution that would later make Carnegie the richest man in the world destroyed the weaver's craft. When the steam-powered looms were introduced, hundreds of hand-loom weavers became expendable. Andrew's mother went to work to support the family, opening a small grocery shop and mending shoes. "I began to learn what poverty meant," Andrew would later write. "It was burned into my heart then that my father had to beg for work. And then and there came the resolve that I would cure that when I got to be a man." In 1848 Scotland, times were hard. Starvation was running rampant throughout the country. Thousands of miles away, another man was born into poverty. This man, as told by Napoleon Hill, would eventually cross paths with Andrew Carnegie. In 1883, Napoleon Hill was born in a log cabin on the Pound River in Wise County, Virginia. Napoleon Hill was born at a time when 1- and 2-room log cabins were typical. At the time of Hill's birth, elementary schools were only open about 4 months out of the year, and attendance was not required. His stepmother suggested that he devote his time to reading and writing, and she concluded, "You might live to see the time when your influence will be felt throughout the state." She didn't know at the time that her words would spark a fire in the young boy, that he would see his influence not only spread across the state, but he would influence generations around the world for years to come. Back in Scotland, and much earlier, Andrew's uncle George Lauder introduced him to the writings of Robert Burns and historical Scottish heroes such as Robert the Bruce, William Wallace, and Rob Roy. Reading became a passion for the young Carnegie. Books became a major factor throughout Andrew Carnegie's life as he pursued an education that would unlock secrets of success. Years later, a young reporter named Napoleon Hill was given an assignment to write a series of articles about famous and successful men. As Hill tells it, this led him to interview Andrew Carnegie, who was at the time one of the most powerful men in the world. Carnegie believed that the process of success could be outlined in a simple formula that anyone would be able to understand and achieve. Hill tells the story this way. Impressed with Hill, Carnegie asked him if he was up to the task of putting together this information, to interview over 500 successful men and women, to discover and publish a formula for success.
I caught my first fleeting glimpse of the profound law which provides the means by which we may choose our own purpose in life and attain it, while I was being coached by Andrew Carnegie during the organization of the Science of Success philosophy. I had just finished telling Mr. Carnegie that I feared he had chosen the wrong person to give the world the first practical philosophy of personal success because of my youth, my lack of education, and my lack of finances. Well, at this point, Mr. Carnegie delivered a lecture that I shall never forget because it changed my entire life and paved the way for my helping to change the lives of millions of people, some of them not yet born. Let me call your attention to a great power which is under your control, said Mr. Carnegie. A power which is greater than poverty, greater than the lack of education, greater than all of your fears and superstitions combined. It is the power to take possession of your own mind and direct it to whatever ends you may desire.
As a result of Hill's studies based on Carnegie's introductions, the philosophy of achievement was offered as a formula for rags to riches success. Napoleon Hill's life work has become the basis for the multimedia system called Your Right to Be Rich. Publishing would become instrumental in the life of Napoleon Hill. James Monroe Hill, Napoleon's father, was the son of James Madison Hill, an English-born printer who emigrated to America in the 1840s. James built a press and began publication of Zephyr, Wise County, Virginia's first newspaper. At the age of 13, Napoleon took his first paying job. It was after school in the coal mines. Coal mining was a dirty, hard job, and Napoleon, at $1 a day wages, quickly decided that coal mining was not a future that he desired. When he turned 15, he became a news reporter in the mountains of Wise County and saw that job as an excellent choice to replace coal mining or farming. A few years later, Napoleon went to work for Rufus Ayres, a prominent attorney who had been Attorney General of Virginia, and in 1901 was one of the wealthiest men in Wise County. Ayres was involved in coal mining, the lumber business, and banking, and he owned the Big Stone Gap Post. Ayres encouraged Napoleon to study law. While Napoleon Hill attended Georgetown Law School in Washington, D.C., he went to work for Robert L. Taylor, a former governor who published Bob Taylor's magazine. While working for Bob Taylor, Napoleon agreed to interview successful business people. At the age of 25, he found himself at the mansion of Andrew Carnegie. It was that interview that defined the balance of Napoleon's life, and it was the turning point that would change the lives of people all over the world. Considering challenges that faced the Carnegie family in Scotland, the Carnegies decided to move to Pennsylvania for the prospect of a better life. The decision was made to sell the looms and the furniture by auction to help pay for the trip. The proceeds of the sale were most disappointing. The looms brought hardly anything, and the result was that 20 pounds more were needed to enable the family to pay passage to America. William Carnegie, Andrew's father, sang one of the popular songs of the day to the family to encourage them to head west to America. These are the words of the song. To the west, to the west, to the land of the free, where the mighty Missouri rolls down to the sea, where a man is a man, if he's willing to toil, and the humblest may gather the fruits of the soil. The song was later manifested into a driving force in Napoleon Hill's lessons. Napoleon Hill explains the driving force of ideas.
I want to describe my discovery in the simplest terms possible, because it will reveal to you why it is true that whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve, regardless of how many times you may have failed in the past or how lofty your aims and hopes may be.
And so the long journey began. The Carnegie family sailed from Glasgow in 1848. The arrival at New York was bewildering. New York was the first great site of human industry. The bustle and excitement was overwhelming for the young Andrew. The family eventually settled in a very poor area outside of Pittsburgh. Young Andrew got his first job at age 13 as a bobbin boy, changing spools of thread at a cotton mill, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. His starting wage was $1.20 per week. His young age and meager wages would not hold Andrew Carnegie down. In 1850, Carnegie became a telegraph messenger boy at the Pittsburgh office of the Ohio Telegraph Company. He paid close attention to his work and quickly learned to distinguish the sounds of incoming telegraph signals. He could translate signals by ear without having to wait for the telegraph operator to translate the message. Sharpening his skills led to advancement. Within a year, he was promoted. As a messenger, he would memorize all of the locations of Pittsburgh's businesses and the faces of important men. He made many connections this way. This laid the foundation for the principle of success that Napoleon Hill would later call the Mastermind Alliance.
If you work for a salary or wages, you have a marvelous opportunity to promote yourself into a higher income and a more responsible position by forming a mastermind alliance with your associate workers, including the management.
Napoleon Hill based the concept of the Mastermind Alliance on the circle of influential people he met. It all started when Carnegie gave Hill a letter of introduction to Henry Ford.
The young man makes up his mind to work. There's no limit to what he can do. If he makes up his mind to go at it without the idea of work, he hasn't much chance. He must study and work. And he must go back in any art as far as he can, just dig up the very beginning. And he must, the more he goes back, the further he will be able to see ahead.
Alexander Graham Bell, John D. Rockefeller, Theodore Roosevelt, Charles M. Schwab, F. W. Woolworth, and William Wrigley Jr. Hill later became an advisor to two presidents of the United States of America, Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. These connections allowed Hill to learn from some of the greatest men of the era. The skill to make connections would prove to be a major factor in the wealth of Andrew Carnegie, along with other skills he developed. Through the young life of Carnegie, his willingness to work hard, his perseverance, and his alertness soon brought great opportunities to him. One of the men Carnegie met at the telegraph office was Thomas A. Scott of Pennsylvania Railroad. Scott was so impressed with the boy that he employed Carnegie. Carnegie advanced quickly through the company, becoming the superintendent of the Pittsburgh division. That would be vital to his later success. The railroads were the first big businesses in America, and Carnegie learned much about management and cost control. Scott also helped him with his first investments. Scott made it possible for Carnegie to invest $500 in the Adams Express, which contracted with the Pennsylvania. The money was secured by his mother's placing a $500 mortgage on the family's $700 home. A few years later, he received a few shares in T.T. Woodruff's sleeping car company. Reinvesting his returns in railroad-related industries such as iron, bridges, and rails, Carnegie slowly accumulated capital. The basis for his later successes came to him by developing a vertical strategy of owning related businesses that gave him more control as he focused his energies on his goal: to become wealthy. That definiteness of purpose became another lesson that Hill published.
When you speak of your poverty and lack of education, Mr. Carnegie explained, you are simply directing your mind power to attract these undesirable circumstances, because it is true that whatever your mind feeds upon, your mind attracts to you. Now you see why it is important that you recognize that all success begins with definiteness of purpose, with a clear picture in your mind of precisely what you want from life.
Andrew Carnegie elaborated on definiteness of purpose as a power to achieve the financial goals you desire, as Hill explained.
First, decide definitely where you wish to be and what you wish to be doing during the next 3 years. And second, decide how much money you desire to be making and what you are going to do to earn it. And third, form a mastermind alliance with at least one person in your immediate family and at least one other person among those to whom you are selling your services. By taking these 3 steps, you will have gone a long way toward appropriating the great master key to success.
As a young boy, Andrew Carnegie loved to read. Carnegie's passion for reading had been given a great boost by Colonel James Anderson. Colonel Anderson opened his personal library of 400 volumes to working boys each Saturday night. The books he read and the lessons he learned drove him to become a self-made man in both his economic development and in his intellectual and cultural development. Through his reading, he was empowered to find a universal truth.
Then Mr. Carnegie continued his speech with a description of a great universal truth which made such an impact upon my mind that I began then and there to give myself a new outlook on life and set up for myself a goal so far above my previous achievements that it shocked my friends and relatives when they heard about it. Everyone, said Mr. Carnegie, comes to the earth plane blessed with the privilege of controlling his mind power and directing it to whatever ends he may choose. But, he continued, everyone brings over with him at birth the equivalent of 2 sealed envelopes, one of which is clearly labeled, the riches you may enjoy if you take possession of your own mind and direct it to ends of your own choice. And the other is labeled, the penalties you must pay if you neglect to take possession of your mind and direct it.
The Civil War created demand for iron products, such as armor for gunboats, cannon, and shells, as well as 100 other industrial products. And that demand made Pittsburgh a center of wartime production. After the war, Carnegie left the railroads to turn his attention to the Keystone Bridge Company to replace wooden bridges with stronger iron ones. Steel was used for railway lines and girders for buildings and bridges. Carnegie made his fortune in the steel industry, controlling the most extensive integrated iron and steel operations ever owned by an individual in the United States. One of his great innovations was developing cheap, mass production of steel with the Bessemer process. The steel price dropped as a direct result, generating greater sales and millions for Carnegie. Even with all these successes, there were hard times. Carnegie had to overcome many challenges, even at his highest levels of success. One that impacted him for the rest of his life was his company's conflict with his labor force. During a severe period of national economic recession in the early 1890s, labor unrest was at its height. In 1892, while Andrew Carnegie was traveling back to Scotland with his family to visit his homeland, back in America, the management of his company, under the guidance of Henry Clay Frick, faced the Homestead Strike. The Homestead Steel Works in the Pittsburgh area town of Homestead, Pennsylvania, between the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers and the Carnegie Steel Company, also known as the Homestead Steel Strike, created a battle between strikers and private security agents. The battle was one of the most serious disputes in U.S. labor history. Carnegie managed to overcome adversities. That lesson is vital to success. Napoleon Hill later wrote, "Every adversity has the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit."
Indifference cannot create a mastermind alliance for you. A negative mental attitude can bring you nothing but failure. Remember always, you are where you are and what you are because of your mental attitude in which you relate yourself to other people. Remember also, your mental attitude is the one and the only thing over which you have complete control.
In 1901, Andrew Carnegie was considering retirement. To make this happen, he once again relied on his contacts.
Control your mental attitude and make yourself friendly and agreeable with everyone with whom you are closely associated if you expect friendly cooperation in return.
Carnegie also taught this principle, that a great business is seldom, if ever, built up except on the lines of strictest integrity. He has said it's not the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law that must be the rule. Always give the other party the benefit of the doubt.
Success is something which has to be planned, and success is something which has to be earned in advance. True, there is such a thing as luck, but just remember that luck is something you can create for yourself if you know the rules and follow them just as I give them to you. Remember, too, that success in the higher brackets of achievement is something that can be had only by taking others along with you. And the best definition of success, which I know, is this. Success is the knowledge with which to get whatever you want from life without violating the rights of others and by helping others to acquire it.
At that time, Andrew Carnegie considered John Pierpont Morgan as America's most important financial deal maker. J.P. Morgan knew how efficiently Carnegie produced profit. He envisioned an integrated steel industry that would cut cost, lower prices, produce greater quantities, and raise wages to workers. To do this, he needed to buy out Carnegie. So Carnegie wrote the asking price for his steel business on a piece of paper and had it delivered to Morgan. Morgan accepted without hesitation, buying the company for $480 million. "Congratulations, Mr. Carnegie," Morgan said to Carnegie when they finalized the deal. "You are now the richest man in the world." Carnegie spent his last years as a philanthropist. From 1901 forward, he devoted himself to charities. One of the most tangible examples is the founding of 2,500 or more libraries in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These libraries stretched across the English-speaking world, including the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Carnegie spent over $55 million of his own wealth on libraries alone. It is said that Carnegie had two main reasons for donating money to the founding of libraries. He believed that libraries added to the nature of America. Anyone with a desire to learn could educate themselves and be successful in America, like he had been. Second, Carnegie believed that immigrants like himself needed to acquire the cultural knowledge of America, which a library would enable them to do. Carnegie has also donated money to schools all across the globe. He was one of the major benefactors of the Tuskegee Institute under Booker T. Washington for African American education. Carnegie represents the idea of the American dream. He was an immigrant from Scotland who came to America with nothing and became successful. Andrew Carnegie died on August 11, 1919, in Lenox, Massachusetts, of bronchial pneumonia. He had already given away over $350 million. Andrew Carnegie discovered and shared his skills and knowledge with Napoleon Hill, who went on to create a remarkable multimedia course, Your Right to Be Rich. Through purpose, attitude, and the willingness to work for it, he taught that individualism, private property, the law of accumulation of wealth, and the law of competition are the highest results of human experience. He had a strong opinion against inherited wealth. Carnegie believed that the future leaders of society would rise from the ranks of the poor. Carnegie believed in this because he'd risen from the bottom. He believed the poor possessed an advantage over the wealthy. The advantage is the lessons learned when overcoming defeat. His 1889 article proclaiming the gospel of wealth called on the rich to use their wealth to improve society, and that stimulated a wave of philanthropy. Napoleon Hill followed Mr. Carnegie's lead. In 1962, the Napoleon Hill Foundation was established as a non-profit charitable educational institution. It's dedicated to making the world a better place in which to live. Napoleon Hill died in November 1970. The American dream is still very much alive. The journey we are on is based on the places we've been. We have the ability to take on almost any problem and find the right answer. The same principles that made Carnegie wealthy are the same principles that drive success and wealth today. Andrew Carnegie donated a fortune to worthy causes before his death, but his greatest contribution to the world by far was making sure that mankind had a self-study program that anyone could follow for becoming prosperous. By sharing his personal success lessons with Napoleon Hill, and, as Hill says, by inspiring him to interview the greatest minds in America and document their formulas for success.
While I was being coached by Andrew Carnegie during the organization of the Science of Success philosophy.
Andrew Carnegie became the father of the most comprehensive and proven method for becoming successful in the world.
Because it changed my entire life and paved the way for my helping to change the lives of millions of people, some of them not yet born.
To learn more about Napoleon Hill's findings, visit yourrighttobericht.com.
I will show you how to write your own price tag, fix your own wages, establish your own working hours, and give yourself financial independence.
Napoleon Hill believed that anyone can become wealthy. All that's needed is work and determination. With all of the wealth-building principles laid out by Napoleon Hill, all you need to do is reach out and take it. yourrighttobericht.com